won't be too long, folks. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome along to the South Grafton Golf Club, and we would like to appreciate their support for hosting tonight's event. My name's Damien Fisher. I'm the station manager and breakfast presenter for Loving Life, the community radio station in the Clarence Valley, FM 103.1. And on behalf of Clarence Media, who, along with Loving Life and also the South Grafton Progress Association, decided to put on tonight's event, so we appreciate their support as well. I'd just like to also pay thanks to the South Grafton Progress Association, Rabbit Rideshare, Liberty Fuel, Allison Waits Real Estate, Lasting Impressions and the Grafton and District Golf Club for their support tonight. I'd like to now ask one of our candidates, Brett, to do the welcome of country. Brett. So tonight's aim of the Meet the Candidates is to hear what each of the candidates stand for and why they're asking for our vote tonight. Now, we're also being live streamed through Clarence Media's YouTube channel, so we welcome those people watching at home and right across the page electorate. For those people who may not have been able to get here tonight, we hope that you get something out of tonight's Meet the Candidates. The format of tonight, first of all, we'll have each candidate speak for 2 minutes to tell you and to tell those at home a bit about themselves and also their point of difference. Following that, we have got some questions that we'll direct to some of the candidates, and then others will have the chance to respond or to also answer those as well. But importantly, after that is for you tonight here in the auditorium, but also at home, to ask each of the candidates questions. We do ask you to show your respect here in the audience and at home, not to talk over the candidates, and obviously the candidates not talking over themselves as well, to make sure that there's no interjection, and we show respect because everyone has given up their time tonight to be here, so we would really appreciate for that to happen. Bit of housekeeping, obviously the bar is open. We'll have a short break at the end of some of the questions, and also the toilets are located to my left around there. So first of all, the reason why the candidates are sitting in this order, we've put them in ballot order. So we've got Thomas Searles from the Liberal Democrat Party down the end, Donna Pike from Pauline Hanson's One Nation, Kashmir Miller from the Greens, Heather Smith, Heather's here, sorry Heather, Heather from the Australian Federation Party, Patrick Deegan from the Labor Party New South Wales branch, Brett Durax from the Indigenous Aboriginal Party of Australia, Ian Williamson from United Australia Party, Kevin Hogan, now sitting member from the National Party of Australia, Hannah Beth Luke, of course, from an Independent, and Serge Killerbeck, who is obviously on his way still, we believe. So we'll start off tonight and ask Thomas down the end. Obviously, he's at number 1 on the ballot paper from the Liberal Democrats, to tell us a bit about himself and also the point of difference. If you like.
One, two. Test? Oh yeah, that's much better. Thank you very much. Turn it down? Oh, okay. So the question I'd have to ask is, what is it that we all value? I've been given 2 minutes to talk about myself. It's not a very long time. I have kind of a unique history like most people do. But what is it that we value that's most important? I hope what I value is what we all value. So the reason I'm running with the Liberal Democrats is because what we value is small government and more power to the person. More power to the community, less power to the government, less power to global governments. The idea is that we have an inversion. Right now, the most power is at the top and we're at the bottom. Now, the last few years, we've lost a lot of that power. We've lost freedoms, personal freedoms, rights to travel. This happens so quick. But I don't think people really realize at the community level, it affects us every day. So I bought a farm during COVID to make a community farm. There's a lot of people that I wanted to help. I'm also very concerned about the cost of living going up, and I wanted to start helping with food security. And this year I was refused a burn permit to do a hazard reduction burn with an Indigenous cool burning methodology. Now, if anyone's been outside in the last 6 months, you would realise that there's a problem there. And so that's the problem I want to address. I want to bring back the right for communities to build and defend themselves, for people to have personal freedoms, the things that we used to all value the most, to actually be something that is intrinsically inbuilt back into us. Rights we thought they were inalienable. I want them to come back. I want our community strong for whatever comes next. And I hope that's something that you all value as well. Thank you.
So it's just while you're there, maybe if you can just tell us your point of difference.
I'd say the biggest point of difference is small government. The idea that we have a government that continually and perpetually grows, without sounding defamatory in any way, but really governments and cancer grow for no reason, no purpose. They're self-feeding. What I would rather is we actually bring that back to the minimum amount of government that we can have, and we start putting that money and that tax that we're all paying back into the people in the community. I think that's the only way we can address cost of living and actually almost all of the problems that our community has. I think that's going to be the absolute best way.
All right, thank you very much for that. Our next candidate is Donna Pike from Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say I'm really grateful to be here. I've been a little bit absent in the beginning because I haven't been as well. And that's the reason. Some people have been asking, where have you been? So I'm out and about now. Have been up through the top areas of the area, but there was a lull there for a while because I wasn't well enough. So I'm back in force. I'm usually quite a feisty little thing, getting out there and saying my piece. And I'm not backwards in coming forwards, which is a Pauline Hanson trait, for sure. So now I'm going to tell you, firstly, my attachment to Page is grassroots. I went to Kyogle High School. I lived and worked in Lismore. I have family in Casino, in Ballina, Woodburn, whose house went under in the floods. My nephew. I have a family property at Coracai, and we are riddled all through the area. And I remember going to the Kyogle Bush Theatre and performing for the community. And I have this beautiful association with the place where I belong. So I want to stand for the people of Page. I want to make sure that they get their fair cut and deal of what's going on in the picture. The bigger picture is way bigger than just Page. We have Page's issues, which is a smaller little problem down here in association to the mass big problem we have at the top. But I have no problem whatsoever fighting at that level at all, and I will. So we already have people in our party, which is the difference, and you've seen it. Malcolm Roberts, Pauline, she got in there and she said what she said. She didn't cut back, she didn't hold back, and neither will I. They pick us for a reason, because we are feisty and we are strong. And you're not going to make it out there if you're not. You're not going to last up there if you're not. So be ready for when we get up there, because we are going to take some seats that you've never seen before, and we are going to rock this country and make the changes that it should have had many, many years ago. There's been too many seesaw party preferences back and forth and deals done, And we've seen it again this year. Liberal and Labor have seen the fact that, okay, they have already sensed that the people are waking up to the con, and they're going to go, okay, what are we going to do this time? Okay, well, we'll align ourselves with some of the little teal people or some of these people. We'll give them money. We'll do money deals. And then when, we'll affiliate with people, and some of those votes that we lose, we might drag back through confusion or through different dispersions. And they've been doing this for years and years and years. They've been doing deals behind the scenes. If you put me as number 2, I'll put you as number 2, this and this and this. And that's not fair, really, at all. We should be held accountable for who we are. We should be upfront, transparent, and honest. I've been a JP for more than 10 years, a civil celebrant. I've actually run businesses, and I won the Coffs Harbour Environment Award for being the first person to ever come up with the idea of putting separate rubbish into wheelie bins. And I was the person that came up with the original idea for the green, red and yellow bin system that went around this country. So I've also been considered a person that has ideas.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. That's a bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Our next candidate is from the Greens, and it's Kashmir Miller.
Hello everybody, thank you so much for having me here in Kyogle. Just start by acknowledging, of course, that we are on Aboriginal land. Grafton, what did I say? Kyogle, sorry. Acknowledging, here I am in South Grafton, thank you, and acknowledging the original custodians of this land, and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I'm a 5th generation Northern Rivers resident. I've lived in our electorate of Page for 22 years, which is my entire life, and I've attended our public schools, and I'm now a student at Southern Cross University studying law with honours. And I'm really excited to be here today because I think my point of difference is that I'm wanting to represent the next generation and fight for our future. What we've experienced in the past few years here in the Page electorate with fires and floods, it is really scary for me, and it has been something that has scared me for over 10 years. When I was 12, when I started hearing about climate change and started hearing that the government was not putting our interests at heart. And this scared me as a young person, and it scares me now. So I want to take those voices to Parliament so that we can finally have a future to look forward to. And my point of difference is wanting to get corruption out of government, to get political donations out of government, and coal and gas money out of government so that we can reinvest that money into transitions so that our workers can have just transitions into employment that is going to last and is going to help our planet, our environment, and our waterways. So I really want to have young voices in Parliament, fresh perspectives, because the current model of what a politician should look like and the current model of what Parliament House looks like is not fighting for our young people. It is not fighting for our marginalised communities as the cost of living is going up. And I'm a student, and I know how difficult it is to live right now as a student when you're not in those vested interests, which is why I'm so proud to say that the Greens do not take any corporate or private donations. So thank you so much for having me here in wonderful South Grafton, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, Kashmir. From the Australian Federation Party, Heather Smith.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming along and listening to us tonight and giving us the opportunity to greet and speak with you. I'm standing as a candidate for the Australian Federation Party. It's a new party that many of you may not heard of before. Our purpose is to return the voice of the Australian people to the floor of the Australian Parliament as our Constitution originally intended. And in doing that, we are actually making a pact with the Australian community and you guys as the electorate about how we'll go about that. And it's a 6-point pact. And one of those points that particularly drew me to the party when I first found it was that I, as a candidate, must vote against my own party's policy if that policy is not in the best interest of my electorate. So I must promise to cross the floor. And I don't know of any other party that puts it upon their people to cross the floor if their electorate feels strongly against a party position. So a second point that, or pact that I must make with my community is to hold a town hall meeting once every month with an open agenda, which means that I must come back into the community and report to my community about what I've been doing in Parliament and how I've been representing my community at the parliamentary level, and take feedback from my community about how I've been doing that and what the other issues that I should be raising with my community are. And I think that's a particularly powerful promise to make to an electorate. Can you imagine 151 MPs going back to their electorate once a month and being held publicly accountable for the last decade? How powerful that would be and how that might change the culture of Parliament in this country. So broadly though, we are a Conservative party. We sit slightly to the right of the centre, but we've got a really, really strong sense of responsibility also to our most marginalised people in our community. We want to make sure that no one gets left behind and no one falls through the cracks. And we also have a really, really strong sense of what's possible with rural and regional communities. So we've got quite a bit of policy that's built around rural and regional communities and revitalising those areas. So thanks very much.
And thank you, Heather, for making the trip down. I know that it was touch and go as to whether or not you'd be able to get here, so we appreciate you coming down. Patrick Deegan is, of course, representing the Labor Party New South Wales branch.
Cool. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to Brett for the welcome to country and welcoming us here tonight. So a little bit about myself. So I left school at 16 at a time when there weren't many opportunities. But what I could do, I could go to TAFE and it was free. From that, it led to a traineeship at the local council, some casual and part-time jobs, and I was able to go to university at low cost. Following on from there, I've had a career working in the social welfare sector right across the Page electorate, working with some of the most disadvantaged people and communities across the electorate. The reason I tell you that is because that same 16-year-old today doesn't have the same opportunities that I had. They can't go to TAFE for free. Their employment is insecure. Wages have gone down, the cost of living has gone up, and it is harder and harder for people to keep a roof over their head, to put food on the table. Those same young people, if their parents can't afford them to go to TAFE, they don't have those opportunities. So that's why Labor has implemented some fantastic policies. Free TAFE courses, extra university courses, 30,000 new social housing properties across Australia. Other policies to help with the cost of housing, aged care policies that will ensure registered nurses on shift 24 hours a day. Aged care workers are currently paid about $22 an hour, and the current government hasn't supported a pay rise through the Fair Work Commission. Labor is committed to do that. Also, Labor will implement a Federal Integrity Commission with retrospective powers and powers for the Commissioner to initiate inquiries. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brett Duro, of course, from the Indigenous, my apologies, the Indigenous Aboriginal Party of Australia.
G'day, welcomes again. But well, to tell you the truth, we all want change. That's about the best of it. We want to be listened to. You just want to be heard. You just want someone to fight for you. I'm sick of the bullshit I've copped all this time. I've grown up here and around. I've travelled it all. I've volunteered around. I've helped, trained, listened to them. That was the main thing. I listen to people. Doesn't take that long to do that. But the way things are going and all this dictatorship and everything going every which way, you can get promised anything and everything. I'm just going to be true to my word. Honest. They've got nothing I want. We've got everything they want. And that's the whole point, is this land is that beautiful and rich. They're trying to sell it off to every other Tom and them others. But what it is about is how we love our land, our pride, our families. It's all everything. And they seem to forget that we're people who have opinions. And I'm out to change that, and I'm sick to death of it. Just like everyone else. I'm proud of everyone. I get to meet everyone. How's it all going? I actually get to put a face and person to them all. But I welcome everything. Enjoy this. It's been pretty fun too, actually, because I get to meet a lot of people I know. I've seen all my family, but I get to meet a lot of new ones too, eh? It's really good. Hear a lot of people's stories. That ain't too good. But if we can actually work together, like I want to do, close that stupid gap they're putting there. Because we're all equal, really. There's forced sailing on everything. They want it, they'll take it, without anyone's respect. I've got their respect, or I don't have them. I have the people, and I'll be your voice, and proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Our next speaker is from the United Australia Party, Ian Williamson.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ian Williamson. I'm a local tradesman from South Grafton. I've worked in the area for the last, since 2000 I think it was, that I started in construction, and since then I've worked in Fire and Rescue New South Wales and Forestry Corporation New South Wales as a firefighter, road and bridge builder. My point of difference that I bring to this is, like Patrick, I left school at 14, close to 15, and started in construction. I started working on a site, labouring. I worked most of my life 3 jobs. I've lived low socioeconomic lifestyle pretty much my entire life. I've never really been given anything. I've never had anything, and I've had to work for everything I've got. The reason I aligned with United Australia Party is United Australia Party gave me the chance, by giving me funding as a low socioeconomic person, that I could actually stand up and be the voice for my community. So everything that I've been given, I'm very grateful for what they've gave to me, but I've also contributed a lot of my own money. The point of difference that our party brings to this, the main thing that I'm aligning with our policies and how I've come about this, is obviously around vaccine mandates. I believe everyone should get their job back. I didn't like the fact, and that was the original reason I stood. Since becoming part of the party, realising that the debt in our country was over $1 trillion makes me feel a little bit sick. Knowing what it takes to pay that kind of debt, I think I'm pretty good in business. I know Clive's pretty good in business. There may be a chance that we can work together, and thanks for the heckling. Maybe a chance we can work together and we can work the debt down. So that's my intention when I get in, obviously to stand by a lot of low socioeconomic people like myself and get our economy back on track. Thank you.
Next speaker from the National Party of Australia, of course, our sitting member, Kevin Hogan.
Thank you, Damien. And Brett, again, thank you for the welcome, mate. And I did this, we've only had, it's unusual actually, this is only the second candidate forum that we've had this campaign, and there's usually many more, but at the one we had in Casino, I did do this at the start as well, and I want to acknowledge the other 9 people. There is 10 of us who are running to be the next federal member of Page. And look, I think this democratic process that we have is a very healthy one. We can be very critical of ourselves, as we do. We always need to look at ourselves as a country and how we can be better and what we can do better. But make no illusions when we talk about, things and freedoms that, that we need to have and maintain, or processes that we have in this country. There are billions, not hundreds of millions. There are billions of people in this world that cannot do this. And they cannot stand here and have an election like this, but to have then the opportunity to actually talk to, grill, have this process with the 10 people who want to represent you just does not exist. So I want to acknowledge everyone at this table who's part of that process and our healthy democracy. Look, the point of difference, why I ran, look, I never really had the desire to be a politician. I live up the northern end of the electorate. When I had children, Karen and I've had a business finance in Sydney as a financial trader. We came back home to Karen's home to raise our 3 children. I was in a school teacher for a while, and then had a couple of my own businesses, including a cattle farm. But when my children were young, what happened was I started, as my parents were, to be very community involved, started getting reactive with their sporting clubs, community clubs, and I started to meet politicians, and then I started to say I wanted to advocate for things in my community. I'm running out of time. The point of difference, look, I joined the Nationals. I like the fact their philosophy, it's the centre-right party, but also it's solely focused, its main reason for existence is to focus on regional Australia. We're the only party that when we go into our party room, all we're talking about is how does this affect regional Australia, and I love that aspect of it.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is independent candidate for Page, Hannah Beth Luke.
I might borrow that one. Thanks. Might be better. Good evening, everyone. My name's Dr. Hannah Beth Luke. I am a senior lecturer at Southern Cross Uni. I teach science, regenerative agriculture, and I've worked with farmers for over 10 years now. I ran away from home at 16 and I lived in social housing. So I was very lucky to have some really good support from the government, from social services to get through my schooling. So for that, I'm very grateful. And now I live in Evans Head with my 2 beautiful kids. I'm a marine rescue volunteer. I chose to run as an independent candidate because I work a lot with farmers and they talk to me a lot about what it is like to be on the front line of climate change. And it was that very day that I was marking my student assessments, it was bringing me to tears about how awful things were for them. And that same day, Barnaby Joyce said, we can't afford to cut our emissions because it's going to hurt farmers too much. And at that moment, I knew that this party was not representing the interests of our region. Now we're all on the front line of this climate disruption. As an independent, I am a Climate 200 funded independent, and I am proud of that. You wouldn't know who I am before today otherwise. So when I chose to run, I applied for funding through Climate 200, and they asked me for 3 things. So the first was that I had a community group behind me, and that's the Voices for Page group, who'd already been running kitchen tables about what's important to people in the community and what they wanted to see from me. So it was that I was funded from the community, and also that I promised to act with integrity. Acting with integrity means speaking the truth, doing what you say you will do, and taking responsibility when you make mistakes. So as a community independent, it's been my business in the last 5 months to meet people from the north to the south of Page to understand the issues that are important to people here, which is having a strong regional economy, integrity in politics. It's about having affordable housing, health and education for all, and it's also about having climate action. And as the independent, as a community independent, I'm here to be the voice of our people in Canberra, to speak up for us and not toe some party line. And that's what it means to be truly independent. That's why I don't preference. That's why I am not associated with any party. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah Beth. And our final candidate to get to know is Serge Killingback from the TNL party. Thank you, Serge.
Yeah, sorry about the racing and that. I'm Serge Killingback. I'm standing with TNL. Most of you probably haven't seen my face. I don't have call flutes all over the place. I stood with TNL because I came to climate change actually through agriculture. I started my working life in the Victoria River District, the Northern Territory. Some of you might know that. I also grew up with cattle, fishing and pubs of all things. And then when I in the 1990s, they tried to get sustainable fisheries management. The government wouldn't do it. I didn't like that. I started reading about sustainability, and of course that led me to climate change, and I've been there ever since. Why am I running? I guess I'm over belting my head against a brick wall. So I want to put myself in a position to actually do something to make things better. And I think we've just seen the result of climate change. I was out there on that Monday. I actually got my new prop a couple of days ago, so I can get back out of my boat. And that's where our party's main goal is net emissions by 2030. I was told not so long ago that that goal is basically impossible. I don't believe it is, and the most recent findings from the IPCC and article in Forbes magazine only came out only a couple of days ago, we've got a 50-50 chance of getting to 1.5 emissions above pre-industrial in the next 5 years. And that's quite scary. And I looked at that and I thought, yep, our policy setting is about right. But we can't do that without also implementing an integrity commission, a federal ICAC that's independent, it's got teeth, and it will hold people to account. And that's pretty much what brought me to TNL, and that's pretty much what brought me in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Folks, please keep the round of applause going, and just thank our candidates for what they've given to us tonight so far. So we'll start off tonight. So basically now I've got a list of questions, and I'll be asking some of the candidates those questions, and they'll also have the opportunity to answer those if they want. We've heard obviously about the devastating floods in the northern part of Page. So if we start off first of all, maybe we'll start off with Thomas from the Liberal Democrats. Thomas, what does your party, what strategies does your party have in place to capture water delivered during such times of obviously the recent floods, to utilise the water that obviously from the floods that would possibly be able to be used for droughts that could follow?
That is a great question. I have a bit of experience with flooding and with the highway. I was the manager of geodetic integrity on the highway, and I've also worked in flood modelling and disaster resilience modelling for a very long time. One of the problems that we have with dealing with flood mitigation is I think sometimes don't understand the volume of water that's coming down. We have a lot of great strategies. I heard of these strategies like increasing the biome of the soil will increase the total amount of water capacity in the soil. Great project. Can massively reduce the amount of siltation. But if we get a metre of rain in a week, it won't do anything. One of the big problems I had with the mitigation strategy, same as climate mitigation, very often the strategies put in place can't actually influence the problem. So similar to with climate and net zero, the amount of carbon dioxide Australia produces can't actually impact the climate. Similar with the floods. Now, if you look at a way to truly reduce mitigation, to truly mitigate those floods, it is building a dam. And I mean a massive dam. It'd have to be many times bigger than the Dunoon Dam. So this is one of the problems that I had, is that mitigation strategies, they often either don't actually have a solution that'll impact the problem, or they can cause devastating environmental consequences. And that's why I was worried that the corporation that was created, that corporation was created to operate above government. It can forcibly acquire land. It can develop without planning approval. It can build without an EPA assessment. When that came out, the news article that came that out, I thought there'd be an uproar, and it was pretty quiet. So this is, I understand the highway's a big problem. We'll investigate that. If we can rectify it, we will. If it's not a problem, we won't. But right now we need to investigate all of these strategies and really weigh up the environmental consequences and the social consequences of creating bodies that operate outside of the planning and environmental proposals that we have spent a very long time developing.
Thank you. Now, we'll move down to Kevin. Obviously, the National Party are there for people in regional Australia, and we hear a lot about building dams and so forth. if the Nationals and the Coalition got back into government at the end of this month, what are the plans? What's the National Party plans to save this water from people going into drought?
Yeah, so the flood mitigation plan is, and look, just to obviously mention what's happened, I mean, I'm sure most people have, some people may not have in the room have witnessed what happened at the northern end of our region about 2 months ago, but what happened wasn't a flood, it was a natural disaster of, that we haven't seen before. So the havoc that's caused has been quite dramatic and quite traumatic for everybody that's been affected. You're talking about 10,000 people have been displaced from their homes, and over 1,000 businesses, they're still not up and operational. But to go to the point that you're talking about flood mitigation, there has been a lot of argy-bargy. Rouse County Council at that part of our region has responsible for flood mitigation and bulk water supply and also and weed control. We've sort of actually taken it from them. So we were looking to do this anyway because they'd been sort of arguing about what a lot of people on Rouse County Council, because they're made up of local council laws, didn't believe in engineering solutions to flood mitigation. They believed only in environmental, and there are certainly some good environmental solutions that could help flood mitigate. But we've taken control from Rouse and we've commissioned the CSIRO to do a whole of catchment, and in fact some of that study will include down here in the Clarence as well, and we want them to come with what their ideas and what they think are the best flood mitigation proposals are, and we've already allocated over $200 million to implement what those findings are that they find. They're already, as Tom alluded to, like the volume of water part of this is they're already sort of, and I don't want to preempt what they're going to say, I think they're going to come up with a number of quite innovative solutions, but one of them is that they will look at the upper catchments, and just within the Wilson Richmond catchment there's 7 or 8 major upper catchments of that, and what they're talking about is holding the water back. So whether that be a dry holding pond, whether you call it a dry dam, it's not water to drink. It's the bulk water supply will be looked at differently. What this is about is just holding the water back, and then once the flood has gone, or a lot of the water's gone, you start releasing that water back into the system. So they think they can, depending what they model, but then again, I don't want to preempt them, they're talking about taking 2 to 4 metres off a flood height, depending on how they recommend what they want to do. So we are committed to that, because whatever they recommend, we will be doing because of the trauma that this has done, no matter the cost also, because the cost of this event will be, people are talking $15 billion. We've thrown out, $1.5 billion just in disaster payments just in the last 8 weeks. So money won't be the option there, but we want people to feel safe where they live, and the CSIRO will come to us with their solutions.
Thank you, Kevin. Kashmir, if I come down to you as a candidate for the Greens, will the Greens support more dams to allow the water to be stored so that in times of drought, water can then be moved on?
So, I'll stand up. So our response to these catastrophic floods should take into account mitigative and adaptive strategies. We cannot put all of our investment and time into just mitigative strategies from another body. Our decisions, which need to be forward-thinking, cannot go without community consultation, and we haven't seen that yet of what the community want to see. And dams and engineering strategies like that are not the only option, because as we see, these floods are not 1 in 500 years anymore. They are not 1 in 100 years anymore. I have seen these floods coming through my life, and they are just getting worse. So dams are not a future thinking option, and engineering solutions on their own is not enough. In the Northern Rivers and in Page, we can use this flood as an opportunity to show to the rest of Australia and the world what living in a post-climate catastrophe looks like and what adapting to this looks like. And this may mean looking at the different ways that we can plan our town and the different options for us. But at the front of that should be community consultation always, which I have not seen yet. And of course, working with our environment and looking at what we are changing and what is changing with wherefore we have gone too far to change, as we don't know when this could happen again. People are still feeling trauma for every time it rains, and we need to acknowledge that it could happen again, and it very much will be likely to happen again if we do not start acting on climate action. So in the terms of engineering solutions such as dams, they are not a future-thinking way forward for living and adapting, and it's not a one-pronged solution. We need to invest in multiple options here and give homeowners and business owners options for the way that they want to rebuild that puts the environment and the community first always.
Thank you, Kashmir. Hannah Beth, we'll come down to you. You've been campaigning quite strongly in regards to the floods. You went through the floods. You were there as well, along with some of our other candidates. As an independent, what are your plans if you get elected to represent the people of Page to make sure that in times of flood, the water is obviously kept safely to then move on to those that are in drought?
Thanks, Damien. I think there's a few, I'd say we actually need a five-pronged approach to this flood recovery and take these learnings across to other extreme events that we'll experience across Australia in the future. And the first is having early warning systems in place. I think that's so important, so people can answer those critical questions. How high do we move it and when? So a really good early warning system, and also I think a contour map that can allow people to know, as I said, how high, all that sort of thing, but also that the emergency services can access to know when to go and rescue people. And then there's been a huge challenge with people being able to access the funds, with 93% of people still unable to get the help they need. So if you had a contour map, you say, right, where's your address, where's your street, there's your postcode, there's your funding. These are the different types that you're available for. So I think that would be really helpful. The other is having a locally run community community response force or emergency service. That local knowledge is so important, whether that's funding the SES and going back to more localised services or however that looks. But I think that's really important. The other is housing, now and for the future. People need some certainty. The CSIRO study might take up to a year. So in the meantime, there's dongers from mining camps. Let's bring them in, put them on people's properties, or negotiate with Airbnb or real estates to help give people certainty of where to live in the meantime. And in the long run, working with different suburbs. Some places may be livable, some places may not be, but giving people some information now about how that's going to go, because people are rebuilding in places that may later be condemned. So that's a real concern. The other is, and that's got to be affordable, flood-proof, fire-proof housing. So it's a significant investment in affordable and social housing for the future. The other is addressing climate action. And I think that needs to be working with farmers. There's a real opportunity here for a net zero emissions Northern Rivers that's working with our farming cooperatives, working with local business, with energy companies to create that net zero plan through carbon sequestration and environmental stewardship schemes that provide a supplementary income for farmers. It happens around the world. It would be awesome to have here as well. And the final thing is, sorry, I know I'm out of time, is mental health support. It is harrowing how heavily, how deep and wide these cut people in our communities. From Tynedale, down here, all the way up through Lismore and through Main Arm and beyond. So those mental health and wraparound services to get people through and get people past this trauma is really important.
And Patrick, from an Australian Labor Party point of view, what are the policies from Labor in regards to this?
I think the initial question was in relation to capturing water for use during drier periods across Australia. So this is something that the National Party talks a lot about. The National Party has been in power in Australia for 20 of the past 26 years, and they talk a lot about building dams. They haven't built them as a solution to capturing water for use during droughts and so forth. In terms of flood mitigation, there's lots of options that need to be looked at, and all options really need to be on the table, including environmental options that Kashmir talked about and the options that Kevin talked about. Some of those are engineering solutions. There's other sensible solutions, such as planned retreat in some areas. We know with climate change, these disasters are going to get worse, and in some areas, it just won't be safe to live there anymore. So we need to consider all of the options, but we need to stop doing study after study after study. These studies have been around for years, and they just simply haven't been acted on. As I said, the National Party's been in power for 20 of the past 26 years. There's been recommendations, there's been reports pointing fingers at councils and county councils because these things didn't happen, when the government needs to show leadership on these issues is not the answer. We need leadership, and we need decisions to be made and acted on.
Thank you, Patrick. Do any of the other candidates want to, Serge, did you want to talk to that?
Yeah, pretty much what everyone's basically said here in regards to mitigation. The idea of yet another report from the CSIRO pulls me up a little bit. The Healthy Rivers report came out in 1995, and both the Richmond and the Clarence got a great big cross. That's not been enacted since. Among the people I've been on the Cape Byron Marine Park Community Advisory Committee is including a couple of Richmond River fishermen. My father used to be one, and they've been calling for years for things like that to be enacted. That's things like, I guess, organic solutions, tree planting, perhaps rewilding, for want of a better word, some of the floodplain, having a look at that. And that's slowing the water down. I don't know that any engineering solutions will do the trick. There's no good paying, you're sort of taking from Peter to pay Paul, as it were. Like, we got to know where the water's going to go. I have to agree with Thomas, this idea of but calling it a corporation. As soon as I saw that word, I went, having worked in administrative law and worked with advocating to government on around sustainability, climate change, conservation issues, as soon as I see those words with a conservative politics running around, that scares me a little bit. There's got to be community consultation. There's got to be an element of public management, public control on this. So having it all in the hands of something called a corporation does worry me a little bit. Might be unnecessarily, but be that as it may. So, I remember years ago, I think the bloke was Tony Anderson, who came up with a system of land management that was basically about slowing the water down. The water's coming. There's nothing we can do about it. Climate change mitigation is what we've got to work for, because we're not going to stop this thing. And we've got to try and slow it down and try and direct it. And those solutions take time to work up. Just one other thing too. Kevin, did you say 15 million on the flood stuff? What was that figure? No, I hope you said 15 billion. Yeah, excellent, good. That sounds like a real figure. Good news story for today. A friend of ours whose house we helped cleaned up, their insurance company coughed up and paid full freight for their house. So they get a good start, and that's something good.
Yeah, certainly is. Thank you, Serge. I do want to go to Brett in a moment, but we'll just get Ian to. Brett, obviously the Indigenous Aboriginal Party was started out at Indigenous town of Wilcannia out in Western New South Wales, and I spent 8 years out in Broken Hill, and I know exactly what the people of Broken Hill, the people of Menindee, the people of Wilcannia went through when the water disappeared from the Menindee Lakes, and the water went down, the Murray went down the Darling out to sea. And I guess that's where the question comes from in regards to capturing the water when it floods. What are we going to do? So Brett, from your party's point of view, do you have a solution?
Okay, no, I'm no good with technology. something of like, have you talked to the people at Rouse in Lismore? Because I did last 2 days, and they're not too happy with it. But besides all that, there is things to be done. We've got to stop a lot of the filling up, making your own water holes. We actually, them big cotton fields, like you were saying, right up top end, all these dams, they're just making problems, moving the land around and creating big holes. I was here. I actually did the Shannon Creek Dam from the ground up. I done the cultural heritage sites and I did the bush regeneration of it. I've seen the impact it had and what it took away. And I see how it has changed a lot of the ways of the waters and the freshness and everything, the bush, the animals. We did do a lot of work to try and do things like making up nice little waterways and planting native plants. But in the long run, it's basically the land has been dealing with itself for so long. And all we do is keep on putting big ass holes in it. Want to dam it. Want to make flood mitigation? Like, you're going to really something different. But when it comes down to it, raising dam walls, sharing this water everywhere, you've got to actually start telling us what you're doing, because that's a lot of money that could be going towards, let me see, Lismore. Have you seen how it's actually eroding the riverbanks? You've got landslides, you've got actual movement on the earth there. People's houses are getting closer and closer to water. You've got a whole island that want to stay at their home. And there's not one piece of word said to them about trying to solution. We talk about building dams and structural feats, eh? Let's build houses in the spot where they can't. That'd be a feat. Put people in houses. At the moment, they're just asking for gas burners, tarps, just to be able to cook and have a shelter. That's even out of Corrickaya, Boxridge, all them other places at Rapville. You've got all these little places. I drove through there. the land's moved itself, bringing back its natural springs. The highway, bless, that was a nightmare. It was, and I will say it, because you've got water running into every which way. You've got Corindale, beautiful landscaping. That water used to run pretty well around the range up there, and now you can't even drive safe on the road. Not happy with that one. People's lives, old people, young, and it's a puddle that kills it. You ever been through it and actually kept your car? It's not nice. It scares shit out of me, I tell you. But then there's, like I said, with the SES, they should get their funding that's put out there. All this other, everything's gone everywhere but to the right places. And all of it is on shit, out of luck, out of time. So, you know, you can ask me any questions, I'll still have a yarn and talk to you. So I'll leave you with it, but there's a lot more to be done with that than a dam, I tell you.
All right, thank you, Brett. I'll get to you in 2 seconds. I'll just go down to the Australian Federation Party, to Heather, and just get your view about saving the water and making it available for those that, you know, we are going to go back into drought.
Okay, so this is a complex issue, and there's really simple solutions to complex problems. And so I'll try and break this up into a couple of things, because having this conversation about drought as the same conversation as flood mitigation doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. So I'm going to park the drought issue. I am a primary producer. I'm a beef producer. I bought my first property in 2013 in time for the Queensland drought. I moved to the Northern Rivers thinking I would move away from drought because I looked at the rainfall records and they were fabulous, and I got here in 2017 in time for it to stop raining in 2018, and then worked myself absolutely mental and insane trying to keep everything going through 2019 and 2020. So I'll come back to drought. I've lived that one for a number of years and I have some views, but it's not what I think is the issue tonight. when it comes to building dams in fragile ecological landscapes that are not likely to have the capacity to do what we would really love them to do in terms of protecting the vulnerability of our towns and cities and landscapes down below, I just want to stay away from the whole conversation ecologically, practically, cost-wise. I'm incredibly pleased, Kevin, that you said that cost is no issue. I just want to direct the funds differently. So I'm glad to hear that the government's committed to spending what needs to be spent. And I was also pleased to hear Hannah Beth talk about never mind long-term stuff, the urgency is now, and a few of you alluded to it. It's housing now. Winter's coming. We need to make people safe, secure and protected in homes. And there's a number of things we can do around that, and the other one is mental health support. The trauma through our community with people at the moment is incredible, and we don't have the resources on the ground to help it. So I really am about action now to deal with what's an emergency situation, and then also adaptation. And so I want to move the conversation away from mitigation and across to adaptation, because no matter what we do in Australia, nature's going to bowl us over. She's done it before. She's flooded Lismore 4 times in 1974 alone. And that was before we had the anxiety that we do around these various things. There were higher floods in well, not higher, this was one of the highest, but there were very severe floods in 1921. So this is actually the nature of the floodplain, it's the nature of the catchment. And we have a society, we have moved away from the reasons that we settled the floodplain initially. We were a logging community and a river freight community, and a lot of our industry and our employment and our society revolved around the rivers. Rivers are no longer the highways of our locality, they're just a nice outlook, and frankly, Lismore's rivers are not even necessarily a nice outlook. So I really think that we've got an opportunity here with the Northern Rivers community to have a genuine conversation about revisioning what life on a floodplain looks like and what our community might look like. So we need to deal with the immediate housing issues, we need to deal with the immediate income and business functioning issues, and we need to deal with the immediate mental health issues. And that is dongas, that is changing planning rules maybe so people can renovate houses on the higher country so that we can move from single occupancy to dual occupancy living. It is about maybe things like relocation. We've got lovely timber homes in Lismore, like that hardwood timber home frame buildings that a lot of Lismore homes are. And we're dealing with a building supplies shortage. No one can get gyprock, no one can get various things. So I think one of the things we need to be looking at is fast-tracking, relocating some of those hardwood homes out of the floodplain and up onto other land developments, because the materials are already there and we can make safe a lot quicker on those rather than waiting for materials and things that we can't otherwise get. So I'd love to see a lot of emphasis put on, you know, the possibility of relocating some of those homes into other areas that are less flood-prone, but also revisioning what life on the floodplain could look like. And one thing I haven't had anyone raise, and we've got a number of environmentally and ecologically conscious people along the table here, is the contamination arising from having major floods through large urban centres and industrial centres, and what happens to that productive land or that ecological system downstream and further out onto our reefs. What has been washed out of Lismore and surrounds and Coraki from a contamination perspective boggles my mind. And I don't know what the long-term impacts of that are, but I want to put it on the table as a discussion point about whether, if we are concerned about our environment and we are concerned about our rivers and we are concerned about the health of the crops we grow and those things, whether we need to consider how we design a town so that it doesn't contaminate those zones downstream as well. So there's a lot there in a complex issue. I'm pleased to hear that the budget is big, and I really feel we need to get on to adapting an emergency recovery straight up.
I will allow Ian and also Donna to you're welcome to have your view.
So for the last 12 years, I've worked in natural disaster recovery. I've also worked as a bridge builder, and I've worked in creek lines day in, day out, every day of the week. I've tried to move flood water or water around a site continuously, tried to de-water sites, tried to keep water from going where it wants to go. It's not going to be an easy feat. The volume of water that came off that hill during that flood, the rainfall was less than 72. 72 had higher rainfall, but what we had this time was a perfect storm. It's La Nina this year. We had the bushfires before it. They've cleared every bit of ground cover off that hill. Most of us don't realise that there was a flood. It was a small flood that happened immediately after the bushfires that just sent gully rakers down through those bushfire-prone areas and created just direct paths into waterways and creeks. I worked on that with Transport New South Wales and Armidale Council on the Kempsey-Armidale Road. It was massive slips, it was massive problems, and it was one of the most catastrophic floods I've actually worked on, and it was almost not mentioned on TV anywhere. That was at the start of 2020. That happened in these hills. They were only small floods, but they were small enough to gully these hills and scar the hills and get that water moving to the creek. The reason that water's hit that creek so hard and so fast and gone into those towns so fast wasn't so much due to the rainfall, it was a perfect storm of multiple disasters coming along. The best way to mitigate this isn't, we're used to living on a floodplain. A lot of people actually want to stay in their houses in Lismore. They've approached me and said, I don't want my house moved. I don't want to do this. I live in Lismore. I live on these floodplains because I love the area. Why would I want to go and live on a hill? This is where I want to be. I understand some people want to move off the floodplain and some people want to get out of there, and that's okay. But what we need to do is we need to understand that there's a lot of people that want to stay in these areas. They don't want their generational home or their generational farm just taken off them and moved away from them just because of this event. This is an area where we have, on average, 2 natural disasters a year. This has been happening forever, whether it be bushfires, storms, floods, it happens. It's a natural disaster. Natural disasters will continue to happen here. We're going to keep getting them. The idea of damming up in these hills here, I'm not okay with that. I believe a creek needs to clean itself out, and that's how it does it. It cleans the weeds out, it cleans it out, it drives it through and pushes it out. Flood's always done that. If it changes path, that's part of natural evolution of the landscape. It happens. I don't think we should be damming up in hills where we're getting landslips upon landslips and massive mass movement in those hills already. To dam that's not going to work. So I think the natural process, work with the CSIRO study that they've engaged and work with the solutions. It's going to be thousands of different that they've engaged and work with the solutions. It's going to be thousands of different solutions we need to try and improve the lifestyles and living on those floodplains, but I don't think we should just approach a blanket solution to say everyone move to the top of the hill. If people want to be there, it's a very big community engagement thing. Thank you.
Thank you again. And just finally on this topic, Donna, where does One Nation stand on that?
Okay, where do I start? After listening to all of that, I have to say that if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same problem. And if you keep trying to just fix the problem and not solve the initial reason, then you're also not going to have an improvement. So what we need to look at is getting the right people together that are experienced. Number one, in our communities, don't let people that are elected to the council allow development in the first place on these wetland-filled, inadequately, supported parcels of land that put a whole heap of people living there, and then they end up with disaster situations, which we've not just seen in Lismore, we've seen in many towns and happen everywhere, depending on who ends up getting their parcel of land put through council for development that was a wetland and probably shouldn't be a development area in the first place. That's number one. There is a possibility, and that was one of my first ideas, is to say, put the houses on another parcel of land. If you've got insurance on the house, if you could relocate them for the people that do want to get out of there because it's traumatic for someone to have to go through that time and time again. For the people that don't want to go there, that's fine. That's your choice. That's why we live in Australia. You have your choice if that's what you want to do. But if you start talking about dams, that's only going to contain the water to there. It's still going to eventually, it's still going to pour right where it is. It's still going to flood. I was working in the flood in Lismore 35 years ago at Lismore and District Pharmacy. My boss calls me up and says, Donna, I've got to come in here. We've got a hills hoist everything upstairs, and we have to then wipe out all the mud. We got the broom. We swept out the mud. I've done the time in Lismore floods myself. I'm a flood local. So I've been there. I've done it. I've done what you've done firsthand myself. So I understand that, you know, if you want to keep doing that and if you're happy to do that, that's fine. But you're going to find that your insurances, they're not going to cover you, which you're going to have problems with. Which a lot of the places, you know, I get their insurances are going higher and higher and higher because you are going to be then labelled into a higher flood bracket, and it's going to be very expensive for you to cover your home next time. You might have got paid out this time. Will you get paid out next time? So you have to take all these things into consideration. Now, my daughter is an environmental engineer. She has honours and majoring in water, and she also has another degree in science and a master's in teaching. But, you know, these sorts of people need to come together. We need to have the proper minds, not just one mind from one department, not speak to the other mind in the other department. We need these people that are experienced to come together and to make a real informed plan and decision. Not just going spending money on this, you know, consult and that consult and never using them, but all the taxpayers keep paying for them. Can I just say one thing? The $6 million, the James Holmes Accord, the however many millions and millions of dollars that United Australia Party, Clive Palmer did, what if we had to put all that money, they had to said, we're going to donate all this money to all these disaster relief people, and we're going to buy this, give it to the councils, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to say, here's all this parcel of land for you, you can put your houses back on it, you can use some of your insurance money to re-stump and remove homes if it's possible, if it's reusable. We can rebuild your homes if we can't. If you didn't have any insurance, we can work things out so that everybody can be re-established and supported. All those millions of dollars can be made like that the minute you call an election. What happened when there was a human disaster? You had to wait and struggle, and you had to live on the street. Pretty much. Now, the other reason we need to, the other thing we can do quite urgently is when you look at supermarkets and you've got a whole undercover area that's a big space. If we start to look at areas where we can have these massive spaces and we can have a little kitchen in there, a bit like this room, or we can have kitchens and areas, we can cordon them off like you can put those little wall dividers, we can start to give people temporary emergency housing for when we have flooding or urgent weather, whatever reasons we have, because we're going to have to look at those things, and we're going to have to be urgent, immediate, and they're going to have to be safe. So that's going to be a way of being able to say, okay, that's immediate, we can go and offer that straight away. I remember seeing articles where people were actually in one of the clubs, one of the girls actually stayed back and she gave up her time to let people sleep there, and they were sleeping on the floor, but she said, I have to let them go, they've got to go. Some people got kicked out and they had nowhere else to go after that. I saw that article. So if we have these places where they don't have to go until they've got something, that we can say change from a massive car parking area, so right, it's all going to become a housing section for emergency, then we've got somewhere urgently with kitchens and facilities for sharing. And that way they can have that as a backup. A bit like when you have, you know, your underground bunkers for wars. It's preparation. And I think we need to think of all the little areas, but we do need to start thinking smart in the beginning and don't make the problems in the first place. So start at the council, start at the decision making, and don't pick areas where we're going to have these disasters in the first place. Yes, we already have Lismore as a problem. We have to deal with that because it already is a situation. But we need to have the right collective minds, come up with proper strategies that aren't just going to be the same disaster and the same disaster again. Because how many floods have we had? How many floods have you had? Millions, yeah. So,
Okay.
well, so you're going to have more. And then what's going to happen? We're all going to be back here again. It's
All
going
right.
to be... Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, so I think we've covered the flood situation with all respect. Let's move on to the state of the country financially. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we've gone into a lot of debt. I'd like to know from some of the candidates tonight the policies that your party has to address the record deficit our country is accumulating at the moment. We might go to Heather Smith from the Australian Federation Parties to start with.
Okay, thanks very much. So I am quite concerned about we've got two levels of debt. Obviously our national debt is well over $1 trillion now, and it's a situation we're not going to rein that in particularly quickly. So I'm very much in favour of us being as fiscally responsible as we can at a government level, and we certainly need to tighten our belt and be very, very careful with how we steer through these next little period. And it's going to be difficult when we are wanting to invest in so many urgent recoveries and at the same time go down the path of, say, investing in net zero legislation and things like that. And I think we're going to have some very, very difficult choices about what's immediate and what has to get parked for later. In regards to our domestic debt and home mortgages, I think there's a lot of stuff that we can also do there around banking policy and around superannuation policies and various other sort of aspects of we need to get to a point where Australians can participate in our shared wealth. And for me, the cornerstone of personal wealth is always going to be home ownership. And so for me going into this, one of the things I really want to see is a diversification of opportunity for everyone at all economic levels to start building towards home ownership. No matter how humble that home may be, we've got to get people onto that pathway, and to do that we need to restructure our entire banking policy and approach to lending. We've got to restructure a lot of our policies around how people save, how they can access their superannuation, and also we need tax reform. I hear a lot of pressure, a lot of conversation around cost of living, and a lot of conversation around wanting to increase wages. And for me, increasing wages is just simply adding to the inflationary spiral, because if we increase wages, we increase the cost of production. And I'm not saying I'm not against, I'm against increasing wages in some sectors. Certainly the aged care sector is one area where we do need to address wage inequity. There's no issue there. But broadly, what I'd like us actually to see as a nation is to tackle tax reform, and it's something that as a country we have not tackled effectively. We've been dancing around effective tax reform now for decades, and we've got extraordinary complex tax legislation, lots of hidden taxes, which means that Australians are working nearly 2 days a week out of their working week just to meet their tax obligations. So really I think we need to be very, very constrained about how we go forward at a government level. I'd like to see smaller government. I'd support the Liberal Democrats in their move towards a smaller government and devolving more control to the community, and then taking those savings and putting them back to key priority areas that actually make real short-term difference to people now.
As the gentleman in the front row point out, Hannah Beth Luke is an independent. So Hannah Beth, we'll go down to you as an independent. How will you keep the government, whoever it may be, of the day, to address the record of our deficit?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough few years, and we're likely going to see the interest rates rocketing up. I think if we're going to see more young people owning homes, entering the market, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And one of the things that came up at one of the community discussions recently was this idea that for young people to be able to actually offset their tax with their mortgage repayments for the first 5 years, and that might be able to help them to enter the market. The other thing, look, it's what we've learned over the last few years is that we're really open to the shocks and knocks of the value chain. We can see that now in the construction industry and the lack of capacity to access materials, and I think it would be really good to see bringing back manufacturing and processing on our shores, and that focus on our local regional economy in terms of supporting farming cooperatives, making sure that they stay strong. Also looking after our small businesses. Like, these are the engine of our local economy: small business, farming, fishing, tourism and construction. So I think coming back to that and just taking care of the people across our region and the regional economy is key. But just making sure that people also can afford to live in their homes. At the moment, it's easier for an investor to buy their fifth home than a young person to buy their first. So we do need to look at that and make sure that we come up with some equitable solutions that aren't going to collapse the economy, but they're going to help build a future for young people so they can afford to have their own home, at least be able to rent and have a livable future. So I think that's really important. It all comes back to the region at the end of the day. Every dollar that's earned in this community is magnified in this community. Farmers are doing well, they go out, they buy their tractors, it all goes back to the regional economy. So I think we need to look to that returning to the local economy.
Thank you. And just finally, I'm going to ask Patrick, because we obviously heard during the week from the opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, that we're all going to get a pay rise, which is, music to some people's ears. If that is the case, how is Labor going to address the record deficit?
Yeah, so in terms of the pay rise, what that is in relation to is for the minimum wage to keep up with the cost of inflation. The minimum wage in Australia at the moment is $20.33. They're our poorest workers, and there are a lot of people right here in the Page electorate who are working in jobs where they are paid $20.33 an hour. We're talking about $1, an extra dollar. That money goes to people on low incomes who will then spend that money in the economy. It will generate money for the local businesses and will actually help the economy. In terms of the question, the initial question was around the debt. So Labor has sensible plans to help pay down the debt. And the simplest one, and the one that hasn't been addressed by the current government, is to ensure that multinational companies are paying their fair share of tax. It is unbelievable to me that the debate is whether people earning $20.33 an hour should get a pay rise, but the government doesn't want to target the multinationals who are taking billions of dollars offshore and not paying their fair share of tax.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to move on and ask Kevin, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but prior to the last federal election, the Prime Minister said that he would establish a federal ICAC if elected. That obviously hasn't happened in this term of government. If you're re-elected to represent the people of Page, will you push for that?
Yes, mate. Can I just quickly touch on the finance one first, though? I think it's a really important question, the finance. I think it's a really important question, just the finance side of that. Just on the good news, if you like, we as an economy, we are the 11th biggest economy in the world by size. And if you measure the size of the economy to the people in the population, we are the 3rd biggest economy per person GDP in the world, which means as a measurement you could say we're the 3rd richest country in the world per person. That's the good news. Also, as a country post-COVID and going through COVID, we obviously have racked up the deficit because of the measures that we took, especially JobKeeper was a big part of that. But we are one of the strongest growing economies right now in the world and have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world as well. So that didn't happen by accident. I mean, a lot of people have done what we did through COVID, but don't have a growing economy. The United States in the last quarter went backwards. But we are looking at our path to get out of this deficit that we're in isn't higher taxes. It's almost counterintuitive. You would think, well, if you want to raise more money as a government, should you raise taxes to collect more? It's almost counterintuitive. The more you lower taxes, the more you raise in some ways. And I'll give you an anecdote that explains that. So the corporate tax rate in Australia used to be well over 50%. It was close to 60%. Now, when the government, the federal government, started lowering company taxes, and we lowered them down to, to close to 30%, we were actually collecting more money at the lower rates than we were at the high rates, because everyone had a go and everyone was going hard, and there was almost an incentive to go and have a go. So we want to grow our way out of. One of the policies I thought that was really important for the country through COVID was the instant tax write-off. That is, if you went out and bought anything as a business, you could write that off completely against your income, and that meant everyone's order books were full, because everyone was going out and reinvesting and recapitalising into their business, which was important. So our policy is to grow our way out of this situation by lower taxes. To the federal ICAC, we have drafted the Commonwealth Integrity Commission Bill. It's about 385 pages. We have budgeted for its implementation. We are trying to get cross bipartisan support on that. It's on the table and it's ready to legislate.
Kashmir, where do the Greens stay on this? Where do they sit on this particular position in regards to establishing an ICAC?
That has been one of our strongest points coming into this federal election, and something that the Greens and our MPs who have been working on the ground in Parliament for 30 years have been pushing for is a federal ICAC, because the fact that in what is meant to be the most powerful house in Australia, that there is not that body with teeth, with retrospective powers to investigate the last 10 years of Liberal government and coalition government corruption is abysmal, and it is embarrassing that we need this so bad, and we need it to investigate the political donations that are right within our government and are controlling our government. Because how are we going to transition and get the coal and gas companies out of where the decisions are being made while the donations are still going into the major parties' pockets and many parties' pockets, which is why I'm so proud that the Greens are strictly no corporate donations, so that we are not in the backs of that. So that's why the federal ICAC is so important. And just touching on, I think that ties into the issues around the deficit as well. As Patrick said earlier, 20 out of the last 26 years have been a coalition government who are meant to be the economic managers, but since we are still in this deficit, it seems pretty illogical to me that that seems to be their claim to the title when it is just not happening. And in the pandemic, the billionaires have doubled, around 47 billionaires have doubled their wealth to 255 billion, while people are struggling. People like I've heard my fellow candidates talking about the struggles of young people, and I'm living them. As we speak, I'm living of how difficult it is financially to be a student, how I honestly could never even dream of buying of my first house, and how before the floods I was making minimum wage, but now I'm making nothing as my workplace got flooded and now does not exist anymore. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to national security, and we'll stay down that end of the table. Thomas, the Liberal Democrats, how will they make sure that Australia is protected from a national security point of view?
Firstly, Kashmir, don't lose that dream of owning your first house. It's a great dream. For national security, I think one of the most important things that we're looking at, the way the globe is changing, the way the world is changing, is that we do definitely have a top-down approach. And we've started seeing, you'll hear things in the news very often about kind of secret trade pacts, obviously recently with China and certain islands. And you start seeing these more and more where there are agreements that facilitate other countries to be able to put military closer to us. Now, I wouldn't want to say anything or act to engage in any way to actually heighten that. I think the key issue for us is to have a very strong military. we are going into a new system. There's never been anything like this in the world before, what we are going into in the next couple of years. And Australia's sovereignty is very important. So even though Liberal Democrats are proposing to reduce the size of some government departments, there's no impact on the military. And I would also say, judging by what most of the world's largest economic forums are predicting, I would also certainly say that we need to look at cybersecurity in a very strong way. It's a massive risk. Unfortunately, we have in some ways sold that out, that we have allowed other corporations from other companies to develop our security and cyber systems. I think that is equally as important as having a strong military and having other independent and sovereign nature. I would say just in regards to that, in a non-military perspective and non-cybersecurity perspective, I would also just say having fertilizer and fuel and very basic commodities that give us the quality of life that we have should also be in the discussion around our nation's security. Actually should probably be one of the most important points.
Thank you. We'll just head down to this end of the table in regards to that question for national security to Serge from the TNL party. Serge, where does your party stand on national security and how will they make sure that Australia is safe?
I'm sort of disappointed I can't do economics and the Integrity Commission, they're some of our strongest ones. Hey, all right. Well, modern monetary theory, go to our website, took me a while to understand it. And the fiat economy with the government, they get to manage the money supply. It's not they do not work the same as your household budget by any way, shape or measure. But anyway, I'd sort of say go to our website and read our policy on that. It's quite voluminous. It took me a long time to understand it, developed by Professor Keane, who's been banging on about for years. If you understand Keynesian economics, then you're on your road to understanding how modern monetary theory works. Which I'm sure Kevin, as a finance man, would have some very strong opinions about. I knew you would. And the Integrity Commission, that's just, Independent Integrity Commission is absolutely one of our core policy commitments. And it's got to have teeth. Frankly, the government model, this area of law is one of my specialty practices when I was in law. And I read it 4 times to believe what I was reading. It is intentionally designed to fail. The fact that it was written and reviewed by a room full of lawyers, otherwise known as the Liberal Party room, is quite staggering. And I had to actually ring up someone who knows a lot more about administrative law than I do, and I used to lecture on the subject. They know a lot more about it than I do. I said, am I reading this right? I can't be reading this right. And they said, yes, you are. So that's a worry. It needs a lot of work. I mean, they can put one up, but geez, it needs some work. And that, national security, I'm going to go back to the old war horse of climate change. That is our biggest national security threat right now. The South Pacific, they're on the move. They need somewhere to go. And that then feeds into what's going on with the Solomons and China and all that. They don't want to be told anymore what to do. They're on their way. We already have internally displaced persons on the move from Lismore to Brisbane. That's what we're looking at, and now it's going to be entire parts of the planet. So climate change has to be taken care of, and then the rest of it will do itself.
Kevin.
Thank you. That is an excellent question, and sort of to follow on from what Tom was saying, look, national security, I think, we've seen the geopolitical climate shift markedly in the last few years, and it's a worry. I mean, I think we all, since I've been around on this planet, we have been through really an unprecedented time of peace. I mean, there's been outbreaks of war, but, in the 20th century, we had 2 major world wars, which were devastating. Look, we all want to sit on the top of the hill and play kumbaya and wish that's how the world would be, but the history of the world shows us that there are bad people, and there are bad people often that become in charges of governments and military. What is happening, I think we've done 2 really important things for our national security. And anyone who is wants to be and is the federal member for any seat, national security is a big part of the federal government and what it does. And I think two of the things that we've done in the last 3 years that have been crucial, because, you know, let's be blunt about this. China have put, and this isn't a China-Australia thing, right? This is a China and a lot of countries things. They have given us the ultimatum, if we want to have normalised relationships with them, they have a list of 14 demands. Now, to give you an idea of what two of them are, one is freedom of the press, and one of them is politicians shouldn't be able to say what they want to say about their country. So it's unreasonable that we would ever give up that sovereignty about that. So I think the two things that we've done that are really important, one is the Quad. That is now, we are now sharing national intelligence with India, Australia, Japan and the US have formed a relationship much like the Five Eyes, which is another 5 countries that we share national intelligence and share a lot of data and have relationships and basically look to others that we're a team. And the other one is AUKUS, and it's beyond the submarines. It is also other intelligence sharing, and it is also other military equipment that we will have access to and share between America, Australia and the UK. Very important for our national security, because bullies, and there's countries out there that are bullies, and what they like to see is weakness, and we cannot look weak.
I'm going to ask, of the major party, Labor, your national security plan and how you'll protect Australia.
Yeah, so Labor has committed to keeping the defence budget at around that 2% of GDP. What Labor really would do differently is to understand that an important part of diplomacy is to actually be diplomatic, to look after our region, to understand that our Pacific neighbours are very important to the security of our region, not going around making jokes about these islands sinking, cutting foreign aid to our Pacific neighbours so that then they are looking at other countries to form partnerships. They are open to having those conversations with countries like China, who are then setting up bases within our region. And to be able to work with other countries, if you sign a contract with another country like France and there's issues, that you actually are upfront and honest with them if there are issues and you're going to look at terminating those sorts of contracts. So Labor will keep the defence spending at the required level, but will also work with other countries, support countries in our region, not going out and doing political things like we'll cut our foreign aid budget to this country because they think it'll win them support from the public, but understand foreign aid is also a very important part of national security.
Thank you, Patrick. And just finally to the United Australia Party.
Really disappointed I didn't get to go down the financial path, but let's be honest, you've probably all seen the ads, so I'll save you the time. So United Australia Party had a great idea about the submarines deal. I myself got really upset when we obviously turned down the diesel submarines, not knowing the full story. We turned down the diesel submarines and I think it was 5 billion we lost? 5.5 billion we lost. That wasn't favourable in my eyes. I would never back out of a handshake deal with someone, but it doesn't. Thanks for the heckling again. You guys keeping it real. So those submarine deals, and then we've now gone into another submarine deal, obviously spending, I think, how many billions? Lots of billions of dollars on submarines that aren't going to be delivered for many, many years. America has submarines available. They have submarines available right now. They've got about 10 years left on their lifespan. I get it, they're old, they're second-hand, but right now we need a submarine fleet. If we had one hostile submarine between Perth and Singapore, we would have no national security. 60 days, we'd run out of fuel. That kind of move, would ensure Australia's national defence against those kinds of hostilities. The other part of this is the climate change movement of closing coal plants. If you're going to close the coal plants, and we've got China already sitting off the coast, China's one of our biggest takers of a lot of our resources. If we force them out of the market, they're a far bigger army, they're a far bigger power in the world. When I grew up in the army barracks in Sydney, there was a little line drew across a map in the sergeant's mess, and it was just above Victoria, and they said that was the effective level of defence line that we had in Australia at that time. I don't know if that's improved now, but that scares me, so I think we need to increase spending in national defence. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just keeping a close eye on the time. It's coming up to 8 o'clock, and I do want to open up the floor to the people that are here tonight, and also to those at home. So I've just got one more question, which is an interesting one for those that are part of a party, and we do have one independent here, but for those that are part of the party. I'll ask Donna from One Nation. Donna, what would happen if you disagreed with some of your party policies and you were elected to Parliament to represent the people of Page? Would you cross the floor? And
Absolutely.
And if you did, would there be any repercussions?
I don't care. I've never
You just use the mic.
I've never been quiet. I'm with the party for sure, but at the same time, I have my moral grounds, and I represent the people that I stand for. I'm straight as a die. I don't like lies, and I like to see things the way they are. I think it's insane that we have a 99-year suppression order with 28 pedophiles listed in Australia. High Court judges, police, and actually a politician, and a whole heap of people in our high-level government system. And they didn't want people to lose faith in the government system, so they put a 99-year suppression order on it, so you don't know who they are. I want to open those things. I want people to know what's going on. I want transparency. I want accountability. I want to tax those high, the millionaires that are. Clive will probably run off all those Chinese T-shirts off his tax. So, the thing is, they're all going to just take big tax ticket gains, and we have to stop that from happening. The small, hard workers are paying for this country. We need to get manufacturing back in this country. We need to get trade of our own. Remember when we used to have a washing machine and it didn't break within 12 months after the warranty finished? Remember when we used to use it and then hand it to our children for the next generation to use? Because I use my mother-in-law's. So we used to have quality products that we didn't put into landfill. You're talking about Climate 20, you're talking about recycling, you're talking about not using waste. How did that washing machine get made? Metals, manufacturing, gases, all those products had to come from somewhere. And when they're no good, where do they go? In the ground. Landfill. So don't let them last longer. Let them mean what they're supposed to mean. Let them last and have a proper lifespan. They might cost a bit more, but they're going to do 10 times more for the environment. And we can become someone's. Remember when you used to go shopping and say, I'll buy the German one, I know it's going to last longer. It's a quality product. We could have Australian quality products. We could be sought after for our products. And our apprentices, which we're going to support, our pensioners, instead of letting our elderly not even be able to afford their power bills, we should be supporting our elderly as well. And that's what One Nation will stand for.
Thank you, Donna. Brett, where does the Indigenous Aboriginal Party stand on this if you disagree with their policies and you cross the floor?
Cool. Well, for start, we wouldn't be doing something stupid like that anyway. We actually have a yarn, and if they even did think of putting something across the floor that was stupid to the people, well, it wouldn't happen because it's not really something that we'd be doing, making our own mind up to do anyway. It's the people are talking. Well, we're doing what you want. It's not really up to us. And to tell you the truth, this is, I got lost a little bit back there. So just give me a second, because I love my mother-in-law and I still live with her. So I've had to wash in a creek. I grew up out of Kangi and washing in fresh water. And yeah, growing up the old ways was pretty cool, actually, and hunting, get your own feeds. I actually grew into a good man over it. But my party, seriously, if yous don't want it, well, we're not going to do it. It's plain and simple. There's no beating around the bush. We're here for yous, the people. Everyone says that, but we're serious about it. And I'm quite happy to just, yeah, I ain't got nothing up. And yeah, oops. I'm sick of the double-handed two sides. We can just be straightforward and just work the truth. It's much easier instead of this roundabouts that we get. A lot of things like, yeah, I've been through just about everything that you could throw at us as a governments. Floods, bushfires, we lived it. I got water running through the front of the house and the back of the house. We worry about our animals. That's something. And the kids love it because they get to see everything just roaming. The only thing they don't like is watching dead animals float through because of the hardness of it all. But we actually do care about the things, everything. We read the bush, we understand it, we love it. Everyone's got Sydney metropolitan ideas, and really, we're rural. We're nothing like what they got in the city, so why they got to keep planning our stuff from the city to here? How about live like us, learn how to understand us? And you people, well, everyone loves the way they live, and that's me again. I'll get used to this time thing, eh? Sorry, everyone. But
Thank you, Brett. Folks, there are plenty of other questions on here, but we are against the clock. So let's take a short 5-minute break. Head to the bar, have a drink, go to the toilet, head outside if you need to, and we'll come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for you to ask the candidates a question. Thank you very much.
You're only very, very young. You know, you've got a long way to go. No, you've got a long way to go to earn and develop and get a future there, so you can get a house. But you can't do that without work.
I know, but the thing is, but even people who have been working are still struggling with it. So it's not.
I don't know. I've been working for 63 years, my dear, but I get off my bum and go and do something. A lot of people will not get off their bum. They select what they want to do. And you can't do that anymore. You have to go where the work is, do the job, and get things done. And then earn your money. Then you can buy a house. Then you go. People can do that. You know, but it takes time. You can't do it in 5 minutes, I'm like that. Yeah, I realise that. But you know, you've gone with everybody's green in their own little way, you know. Some people do it helps with the environment and stuff like that. But on the same token, you can't go overboard. You've got to be careful and allow things to happen.
I know, we are careful, that's why we've
Too
been
careful.
well, for right now, for what we're going through, I'd rather be too careful.
How are you, mate?
Better to be more careful. So.
Living the dream, I'm finally getting better at public speaking. Slowly. Slowly.
Hello, how are you? We won't be met with
What have you been up to?
that will happen. Well, it's going to take compensation for all the things you do without. You know, if you do your homework and you look into Australia, you know that every man, woman and child in Australia,
Karen, that's a green jumper. A different colour.
every person, carbon credits are, got all the green and stuff like that. In London, there's the same amount of people in London. They've got 0.6 square metre credits. So we're a long way better off than that. So why should we do it so hard?
Well, we don't have to do it hard.
We are. We're doing it a bit hard.
That's not our fault because we're not in government at the moment. Like countries there.
No, you do. Where you operate is within Canada. We're so restricted in the building industry now. We can't get things through environment. Everything is environment. They're putting conditions on us which is totally ridiculous just to satisfy the environment. They don't work. They don't work. But they still insist on doing their own stuff. We do.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to go get a drink, but thank you for your input. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think so. Folks, if we can just get you to come back into the auditorium, we'll get our question time from the audience and those online underway. We're very aware of what the time is, and we did say that it would be finished by around 8:30.
Did they call you the Honourable Evan Hogan? Do you get that? Do I get that if I win?
Well, you know what you do? I think
Or do you have to earn that? Is that the extra time?
why you're an MP, you can be called. But if you were never a minister, if you become a minister, you can always be called. But if you're never a minister, you never.
What's that?
Yeah. So I enter.
You're honourable now, but you're not technically for life.
Well, I will be the assistant counsel. So I think we should all try and do that.
Oh, God. If I had known this, it was only that I think it was my father said it to me. He would never call me that. So
I've got some mates who really are quite rude about it, actually. It's quite disrespectful. You could say.
it's disgusting.
We're very fucking funny.
Disgusting.
Very funny though. Very funny.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll ask you to come back in and take your seats, please.
Serge, have you ever read von Mises, M-I-S-E-S, his monetary theory? They're quite, yeah, it's quite interesting. I tried to get my head around that and read his stuff for ages.
To be honest, I'm an old Keynesian.
We all were once. Von Mises is really interesting. I couldn't get my head around it because he's all about the money supply and the velocity. Which was quite interesting.
It's working.
That's luckily, I'm glad I knew that.
Luckily, you explained that to me. Luckily, I've got a direct line to see.
Talking about von Mises probably is okay. Thank you.
Live streamed chit chat.
No, I'm good, thanks, Dan.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. We are going to now move into your question time for these candidates. We do ask that you raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, then stand up and move to the side so we can capture the footage so our people at home are able to see that as well. Candidates, thank you very much.
Damo, can I ask you a request? If they're affiliated with a group here, they should declare that. If they're a member of the public, great, but if they're part of a campaign, they need to acknowledge the brand.
Kevin has just asked, and I don't think that should be a problem, that if you are asking a question and you're part of a party or a group, if you would just please declare that so that we're aware of that. But again, it's all about respect. I mean, these ladies and gentlemen here tonight on the table have given up their time and travelled long distances, so we appreciate that and appreciate the fact that they've been able to pass the microphone along and get through the night. So first things first, is there anyone here in the audience tonight that would like to start by asking a question? We've got the gentleman already over in the face mask. We'll let him ask the first question if you'd like. And candidates, we've limited it down to 60 seconds. I know 60 seconds isn't a lot of time to answer the question, but again, due to the fact that we're against the clock, we'll ding at 1 minute 15, and then at 1 minute 30 we'll give you 2 dings, and if you keep going, we'll just keep on ringing the bell. Well, we'll ding at 1 minute as well. All right, so over to you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Steve Fletcher. I'm a member of the Australian Labor Party. My question is to Kevin. On the 23rd of October last year, David Littleproud, your deputy leader, stated that the National Party was firmly pro-nuclear power. Earlier this year, your leader, Barnaby Joyce, said that anybody living near a nuclear power plant in Australia will get free electricity. The Australian Nuclear Association has identified 20 sites on the eastern seaboard. Number 2 on the list is Coolcan, just the other side of Grafton. Would you be happy to see a nuclear power plant in Page? And I'd like anybody else to that wants to comment, please do.
Thank you. Kevin.
No, I'm not in favour of that, and we don't support that as a party. When we negotiated our net zero 2050 plan, we have a plan to get there. We have the technology that we want to support to get there, and nuclear is not part of that plan. So we have one of the new technologies that we do want to incorporate is green hydrogen, and we've identified areas around Australia where we think the green hydrogen plants can work. So it is green hydrogen. This is a new technology that we want to invest in, not nuclear.
Are there any other candidates that would just like to add a comment to that?
Can I just ask a question? I'll just to Kevin on that.
Yeah, no, it's if you just if you've got one reply to that gentleman.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm pleased to hear Kevin say that, and that is really worrying to me to hear that Barnaby Joyce from the this one doesn't work. Hello? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that that's really worrying to me that a member of the party of the coalition that is in government would suggest something like that would pose such a major threat to our area in Grafton, where we have such an amazing agricultural business. The kinds of threat from waste that does not decompose would cause to our area, and also the threat of, we're talking about defence earlier, the kind of threat of having a nuclear power plant in our area, what that could mean for us. And I'm happy to hear that the Kevin Hogan is more interested in green technologies. However, that is a concern at the national level, that it is the Nationals' policy that they are still saying in recent months that is what they support.
Just to reiterate,
Okay, if we can go to another question, please put your hand up and please be respectful.
I'd just like to thank all the candidates for putting their name up, and I think it's a pattern that around Australia that we've got so many small parties and independents, and it's a sign around Australia that we're fed up of the major parties. I'm actually from Noosaville, and I don't belong to anybody here except I believe that we should have a lot more independence in government. And so, Hannah Beth, I'm going to ask you particularly a question on females in politics, because I had a daughter that was doing aeronautical engineering. She, out of 120 graduates in the first year, she came third, the third top, and she had a professor to tell her and to inform her that she's wasting her time doing aeronautical engineering, and she gave it up. So I think in politics as well, we see a very minor representation of females, and I believe if we had a leader of Russia at the moment, a female, we wouldn't be throwing missiles to children and to school children, and so.
If you could ask your question,
yeah,
please.
my question is, Hannah, what can you do if you get elected as a female to represent the females in Australia?
Look, you've got to model the change that you want to see. If our kids were looking down on the way that our parliament runs, they would be thinking, if I behave like that in the classroom, I'd be sent out, I'd be sitting in detention. One thing that never inspired me to politics was that bickering that we see, and I believe that having women in government is a fundamentally different way of doing things. In terms of when women talk about their achievements, they always talk about we as a team, and it can often be more focused on the individual when it's the gentleman, making a generalisation here. But look, it's about bringing people together, it's about being inclusive, and I think women do have a more gentle approach to negotiating, working together, and finding solutions that, especially when people disagree, people may not love the outcome, but they can live with them. And I think that's something that, by working together in a respectful way, by listening to people in Parliament and in the community, we can have a better politics.
Thank you, Hannah Beth. Would you like to stand up, sir, and just if you could move to the side for us, just to that side over there where the microphone is. Thank you. Sorry, just one moment. Just two of the candidates wanted to say something. Heather, we'll come to you first.
Hello? Right. Okay, so just on the gender situation, I've worked in agriculture all my life and have agricultural banking, a lot of very male-dominated industry, mining. Yes, I've been to the dark side, worked underground, very male-dominated industry. went to ag college as a 14 or just 15-year-old, and was the second year of women into Emerald Agricultural College back in 1992. I'm dating myself a little bit. And I really want us to step away from the gender conversation. It's divisive. Can we just go back to being good people with good principles and good ethics about how we conduct ourselves? I don't necessarily support quotas. I don't necessarily support the divisive conversations we have around gender. Yes, there are some areas of vulnerability in certain genders. Yes, we have different ways of approaching things. And I heard someone mention the mean girls, and women can be really, really cruel. So I don't want to make it about gender at all. I agree with Hannah Beth that the behaviour that we see in politics at the moment is not something we'd accept in our own households, and for the leadership team of the country to behave in the way that they do, I think is reprehensible on some fronts. And I think diversity in Parliament is essential. Diversity of parties, diversity of views, diversity of backgrounds, particularly people with grassroots experience who have not been lifetime politicians. And I think coming from community and taking that community voice up potentially is going to remove some of that disconnect and the fishbowl behaviour that we see.
Thank you, Heather. And I know, Donna, you put your hand up as well.
I just wanted to reflect on something that I came across, which is quite sad. Klaus Schwab, I don't know if you've heard of him. He is part of the New World Order, and he has a group called the Young Global Leaders. And we do have a Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who was one of his graduates from the Young Global Leaders group. So, you know, sometimes people come through different areas of, you know, whether they are aligned correctly, and then they become opportunists of those areas. I think that's not a good thing. I think we need to be more upfront with where the equality and the opportunity is coming from. And I think the people that you see here are real and caring people. And I think they're the people that should be in government, not some self-appointed and self-elected person that's dictating maybe your next potential Prime Minister or person that's going to be ruling your country. And I didn't get a chance to earlier, but you can't buy land in Bali unless you're born there. And yet it's not a big rich country like ours, but we're selling our country as fast as we can to China, including our housing and our land and our water leasing. So why were we ready to sell everything and give it away when you can't even buy a block of land in Bali unless you have been born there?
Thank you, Donna. And just finally, Kashmir, did you want to say anything in regards to the question about gender?
Yeah, I completely understand these points, and I don't necessarily think that... Yeah, I'll just wait for the laughter to finish, sorry. Yes, and I strongly believe that we need a more representative parliament in both women and young people, because it is called the House of Representatives for a reason. We need representative government, and the fact is that we are still one step behind in Parliament, both women and young people, several steps behind. Like when the first female MP was elected, she didn't even have a toilet in Parliament House for 20 years. And this was not that long ago. So to say that there is not a gender inequality issue in Australia is false when we still see such high percentages of women experiencing violence, domestic and sexual violence. And our government is not working effectively to change this. And the fact that women can have sexual assault committed to them in Parliament House, and we are still not seeing recently, and we are still not seeing change when that can come out of our current Parliament, I think says a lot about what we need to change and the kind of representation that we need.
Thank you. If we could please just show a little bit of respect for our candidates up here tonight. We'll go to the question from the floor. Sir, your name and if you're associated with it.
Thank you. My name is Peter Clement. I've recently joined UAP and I'm also strongly aligned with the Freedom Parties and I've been supporting those. I'm a health professional with over 40 years experience. I've worked in intensive care. I've worked as an intensive care paramedic. I'm also mindful that I like to keep a healthy lifestyle and I can no longer practice my profession in our current health system. Our current health system is crashing. Every aspect of it is crashing, whether it's aged care, pre-hospital care, community care, and nursing care, and our old people, our vulnerable people in our community are suffering badly. Our education system is suffering badly because people are making a conscientious choice about not taking something that is deemed and only approved as an experimental vaccine.
Can I just ask you, sorry to interrupt, could you just ask the question to the candidate?
The question is, how is our government, and basically speaking to Mr. Hogan, how is our government going to reap and get back the thousands of people that have had to have left those industries I've just mentioned and be able to retrain them and keep them current, because our systems are collapsing and we need to get them back? How are we going to do that, sir?
Hello. Yeah, look, Peter, this is a very good question. Look, given what the period that we've been through with COVID, obviously there was a whole methodology and there was a rationale about that, which I understand a lot of people would disagree with. But until we got vaccinated, until we thought those vaccinations rolled out, that we wanted to make sure that people were protected and therefore you had to do or couldn't do certain things unless you were. My personal belief, and I do highlight the fact that a lot of this is legislated at a state level, and I'll come to that in a minute, because we saw a lot of state governments do things differently. And to take, like, just looking at the border closure, for example, between New South Wales and Queensland, I thought was very unreasonable at certain times. But back to your point, you haven't been vaccinated. Should you be able to go back to work? I personally think you should. I think if we have the belief that vaccines work, which we do, or it makes the illness for you not as severe as it otherwise would be, and everyone who wants to be vaccinated has been, then I think people who've chosen not to be should be allowed back into the workforce that they want to go to. And I think there has been, and again to highlight this, the states run this, and I think South Australia, from memory, is, and don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but I think it's the South Australian state government that has made some, has started to move on that area. Does that answer your question? Well, that's a minute, but I think
with respect, sir, it probably doesn't, because I know it's a state thing that's doing this, but are you telling me that the federal government is powerless to be able to influence the states to be able to do this?
Well, in some ways, yes, Peter. I mean, the Constitution, what COVID showed was how this federation works, and very much the strengths and very much some of the weaknesses of it. We never wanted, the Commonwealth government never wanted any state borders to be closed. But the Commonwealth was powerless to override the state government's constitutional right to do that. And this has all been born, as I'm sure you understand and many people in this room would be. The state governments existed before the federal government did, and they ceded powers to us, and they kept a hell of a lot of them. So in some senses, yes, I mean, there was national cabinet and there was obviously discussions around this, but on many times, look at Victoria. Victoria did things very differently than some of the other states. So yes, it is, in some senses.
All right, we are against time. So within 60 seconds, if you could please, Donna.
Can I just tell you there's some really urgent things going on. If you think the government is a problem, superseding the laws and above federal and state, I've got to tell you that the United Nations are about to sign agreements which are even higher on about 124 countries, or 126 might be, the numbers are a bit different there, to say that they're going to be able to supersede our government laws under the terms of a pandemic, and they're going to be able to bring in the UN trucks, which is what we saw in Sydney with the big rubber bullets that got fired into people's bodies relentlessly, with no recourse whatsoever. And they're going to be able to tell you to lock down the whole country. They're going to be able to tell you, you all got to be vaccinated, the whole country. They're going to be able to tell you, cancer's a pandemic, this is a pandemic, that flu's it. Whatever they want to say, they're going to be able to do. And our government has going to have no say whatsoever. That's another tier of totalitarian dictatorship that's going to supersede our laws altogether. Now, I want everyone here to go home and I want you to research and I want you to watch a video. And it's by The High Wire. Write this down. This is the world-leading virologist and immunologist, and he is Geert Vanden Bosch, and he has put a video out on what's happening with our immune system with this particular virus. A virus normally peaks, we all get it, our immune system kills it, you know, it fades out, and then we get it again later.
With all due respect, Donna, sorry, if we can...
I'm just saying it's there, and these are the world-leading experts.
And I'm sure if anyone has any questions,
and can I just ask? No, I'm still answering this gentleman's question. With the medical, just one more thing, the doctors were silenced, and they were given letters to say they were not allowed to give scripts out.
Okay, thank you, Donna.
Medication, you know, people of our
folks,
country.
In all fairness, it is 8:30, Donna.
I'm just saying.
Yep.
The government stopped them from prescribing medication that they wanted to prescribe to their patients.
Folks, it's 8:30.
They weren't allowed to choose their own medication.
Please cut the mic. Okay, we've got two more people that have got questions. Kevin, would you mind just... If we can just keep it to 60 seconds, straight question to a straight candidate, and we'll get it answered so we can wrap things up.
Okay. Mike Stark, I'm a member of the ALP. To Mr. Hogan, real wages continue to be eroded under this government. Nehru, as a concept and a theory, has been discredited. For the past 7 years, the coalition has claimed increases in wages are around the corner. It's a long, long corner. A report has been released entitled "Wages Crisis Revisited" by Dr. Stanford, Professor
Have you got a question, please?
Mr. Hogan, would you please comment on the recommendations in that report to increase wages?
I am exceptionally proud of this government's economic record, that we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Mr. Hogan,
I'm proud of Australia, proud of Australians. And I'm also exceptionally proud that we have, I remember it, I know it, the unemployment rate is 4%. And the unemployment rate is going to have a big 3 in front of it soon. That is going to help wage growth. Especially proud of Australia and Australians. Our whole episode, our whole way we manage COVID economically, the fact we're the fastest growing economy in the world, the fact we have a low unemployment rate, exceptionally good economic management, very proud of this country, very proud of Australians. Thank you.
Okay, folks.
Very quickly, Mr. Hogan, you've managed to
if you'd
avoid
like to
the
talk to
question with
Mr.
a lot
Hogan
of waffle.
next door, that's you're more than welcome to. We have reached our time. I do apologise, but if you'd like to talk to the candidates, you're welcome to do so. Next door, please accept my apologies. It is past 8:30. We did say 8:30. Folks, could you please thank our candidates tonight? Obviously, there's lots of passion, lots of dedication, and lots of thoughts and ideas that they all have. So, on behalf of Clarence Media, our sponsors, and also Loving Life, to all the candidates here tonight, thank you very much for coming and driving as far as you did down here tonight. Please have a safe night. If you would like to go back and watch it, it's available on YouTube. And, of course, there's also other interviews on clarencemedia.com.au. Thank you very much.